I'm concerned about in our community the things that happen in our neighborhoods having to do with race and poverty. And I'm wondering just the disparities in our education system and our criminal justice system and what roles you see the city playing in helping with those kinds of issues and the mayor's office playing in dealing with some of the racial disparities, social economic disparities in our city.
That is a concern. With regard to poverty, for the first time in recent city history, we don't have a deeply troubled neighborhood in the city of Madison, to the extent that we had them at Darville Worthington or Broadway Simpson, or when I took office, it was Allied Drive. And we've worked very, very hard at that. Some of it is hiring police, but that's only part of the equation. We've added 64 new police officers in my 8 years. Previous 8 years, we added 46. So, part of it is adding police, but part of it is working smarter with them. So we created a new unit just to focus on gangs, another new unit to be formed this year to focus on chronic offenders. But then we've also increased community service spending by 53% over the last 8 years, when inflation has run about 18%. We've created new programs like Transit for Jobs, which helps people get free bus passes so they can look for jobs or keep a job. We created a low-income bus fare program to help people get to work. We created a program called Emerging Neighborhoods, which is a small pot of money that can be used very quickly to take care of what are small issues in neighborhoods before they become big neighborhoods, to try to prevent the next Allied Drive from occurring. We developed a program called Neighborhood Indicators, which is a battery of mostly statistics, but facts about 70 different neighborhoods across the city. And the idea is to pick up early warning signs of stress in the neighborhood, go there, diagnose what the problem is, use our neighborhood resource teams and others to do that, and then use resources like the Emerging Neighborhoods Fund to address whatever issue is there. And the idea is to spend a little bit of resources in the short run to prevent having to spend over $10 million like we did in Allied Drive to fix the problems there.
According to the clock, we have 40 minutes left. I would like to spend the entire 20 minutes that I have left talking about this subject. Where do I start? Let me point out that in terms of crime, if you've read Freakonomics, you know that crime is more than anything else a function of the cadre of young men up to the age of 30, 35. And as they go through the years growing up, if that cadre drops, then crime is reduced. That's why crime went down in New York City. That's why crime went down in Los Angeles. That's why crime went down in Chicago. That's why crime went down in Madison. And unfortunately, one of the few cities where it didn't go down was Milwaukee. Okay, so do we define our neighborhoods in terms of whether or not crime has been reduced? Perhaps. I would rather look at it in terms of what are we going to do in terms of economic sustainability, what are we going to do in terms of developing strong, economically independent households. Now, there is a role for the city there. We had a really good start back in the 90s. It's what actually got us stabilized for almost a decade. It was our neighborhood resource teams. This is where we identified about a dozen specific targeted neighborhoods, populations of 500 up to about 1,200, I think in one instance as large as 2,000 people. We brought in police officers and public health nurses. We brought in firefighters and housing inspectors. We brought in employment specialists, librarians. Some teams had 8 city staff, some had as many as a dozen. They first worked together and learned from one another. They worked together and then they partnered as they learned what they were doing with an objective, with the strengths of the neighborhood, the institutions in the neighborhood. They may have been property owners, they may have been activist parents, they may have been religious organizations. And one of the things that we learned when we finally got Dane County to join us, and I think you'll all recall joining forces for families. Joining forces for families is when the county added a social worker to those teams. And they became joining forces for families. And our team members came back and said, once they had the county social worker, that they felt that their productivity and their success was tenfold what they had done before. That's one of the things we have to do, and we partner with the schools. Now, I'd like to just mention how this all originated in 30 seconds. A police officer sent a note to me saying, I'm the new community police officer in the Broadway-Simpson neighborhood. I know what community policing is, but I don't know what I'm doing here. You think about that. That's not a question from ignorance. That's a very profound question. Because what that officer was saying is, I'm not building anything. I'm not creating anything. And that's what we have to be doing in all of our city neighborhoods.
Well, in agreeing with what Paul said, let me add another set of things that we've done, because in my earlier answer I did focus mostly on crime. Of course, the neighborhood is not just about crime, but until people feel secure in their neighborhood, it's difficult to accomplish anything else. But we have invested in a lot of other things. The Lucier Wexford Community Center, the Goodman Atwood Community Center. We created a new center at Meadowwood, which has been, it's a small foothold, but it's been tremendously important and successful for that community. We contributed $1 million to the new Urban League's Economic Development Center, which is all about creating jobs. We created, on our watch, the Latino Chamber of Commerce and the African American Chamber of Commerce. We have been supporting a program called MAP, which is all about getting folks who maybe have had a spotty work history or no work history, or maybe they've just come out of prison. It's about getting them the tools they need to actually get into the workforce. And we've worked with a program called START, which is about getting folks in that same kind of condition into the trades. Because in the building trades in Dane County, the average age of a worker is about 50 years old. They need more people to do good family supporting jobs.